the strategic context, the Horn of Africa re-emerges as a maritime pivot. Its coastline stretches along the Gulf of Aden and the western edge of the Indian Ocean. Overlooking one of the world's most consequential maritime choke points, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This narrow passage connects the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea, and by extension to the Suez Canal, forming a corridor for global trade and energy shipments. For decades, the region was framed primarily through the lens of instability piracy off the Somali coast. Internal fragmentation, humanitarian crises, and counter-terrorism campaigns. However, geography does not lose its strategic value simply because governance is weak. Ungoverned spaces often invite external competition. Today, the Horn is no longer perceived merely as a fragile periphery. It is increasingly viewed as a pivotal maritime platform within a wider Red Sea security architecture. The defense agreement between Somalia and Saudi Arabia must be interpreted against this structural transformation. Signed in Riyadh, the pact appears to focus on conventional areas of military cooperation, training, technical assistance, and institutional support. Yet in geopolitical terms, such agreements are rarely confined to administrative coordination. They serve as instruments of strategic positioning. The Red Sea corridor has become progressively militarized since 2023. Attacks on commercial vessels by Houthi forces operating from Yemen have injected volatility. This trade artery handles roughly 15% of global commerce and approximately 30% of global container traffic. Shipping disruptions have forced some companies to reroute vessels around the Cape of Good Hope, a significantly longer and more costly path. Insurance premiums have risen. Supply chains have experienced renewed fragility. In this environment, coastal states are no longer passive bystanders. They are increasingly central actors in maritime security calculations. For Saudi Arabia, whose western coastline runs along the Red Sea, stability in this corridor is not an abstract concern. It is directly tied to energy exports, commercial diversification under Vision 2030, and the credibility of its broader regional leadership ambitions. Riyadh's strategic doctrine has gradually expanded beyond the Gulf. Historically preoccupied with threats from its eastern flank, particularly Iran, Saudi Arabia now confronts a western maritime frontier that is equally consequential. The Red Sea has evolved into a second strategic perimeter. Securing that perimeter requires partnerships across the African littoral. Somalia, in this context, is not simply a recipient of military assistance. It occupies a commanding geographic position along the Gulf of Aden. Despite internal challenges, it possesses one of the longest coastlines in mainland Africa. Any durable Red Sea security framework inevitably intersects with Somali territory. For Somalia, the agreement reflects its own recalibration. Following decades of internal conflict, Mogadishu has sought to consolidate federal authority and reintegrate into international diplomatic structures. Strengthening the capacity of its armed forces remains central to this process. External partnerships are therefore instrumental. However, the choice of partners is strategic. Aligning more closely with Saudi Arabia signals a deliberate anchoring within a particular Gulf security axis. This alignment also suggests an emerging pattern. Maritime security is increasingly being managed through cross-regional coalitions, rather than solely through traditional Western naval patrols. Gulf states are assuming more direct roles in shaping the security environment of adjacent African shores. The Somalia-Saudi Defense Agreement exemplifies this shift from episodic engagement to structured security embedding. The significance of embedding should not be underestimated. Training missions, advisory programs, and defense coordination mechanisms gradually shape institutional loyalties and operational interoperability. Over time, such arrangements can influence procurement decisions, intelligence sharing patterns, and strategic outlooks. They create durable linkages that extend beyond the immediate scope of the signed memorandum. Thus, the agreement represents more than bilateral cooperation. It is a reflection of systemic maritime competition in the Red Sea basin. As non-state actors disrupt shipping and regional rivalries intensify, coastal alignment becomes an instrument of power projection. Ports, coast guards, surveillance networks, and military training pipelines form the infrastructure of influence. The Horn of Africa is therefore re-emerging not as a humanitarian narrative, but as a maritime pivot within a contested corridor linking Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. In such a landscape, defense agreements function as early indicators of deeper strategic consolidation. The Somalia-Saudi Pact signals that the Red Sea's western shore is no longer geopolitically neutral terrain. It is becoming an arena in which regional powers position themselves preemptively, anticipating shifts, mitigating risks, and preparing for a future in which maritime control may determine economic resilience and political leverage. Part of this event was the recognition of Somaliland as an independent state by Israel. What had long remained a contained internal Somali dispute was abruptly elevated into an international geopolitical variable. Somaliland occupies a strategically significant stretch of coastline along the Gulf of Aden, a former British protectorate. It briefly united with Italian Somaliland in 1962, formed the Somali Republic. Following the collapse of Somalia's central government in 1991, Somaliland reasserted its independence. It developed functioning state institutions, including a currency, security forces, and periodic elections. Yet despite 3 decades of de facto autonomy, it remained diplomatically unrecognized by the international community. Recognition alters strategic equations. When Israel formally acknowledged Somaliland's sovereignty, the move transcended symbolic diplomacy. It introduced the possibility of new, external alignments along one of the most sensitive maritime corridors in the world. Recognition is not merely legal validation. It creates pathways for defense cooperation, infrastructure investment, and intelligence collaboration, and potentially military access. For Mogadishu, the move was perceived as a direct challenge to Somalia's territorial integrity. Sovereignty remains the organizing principle of Somalia's post-conflict reconstruction. Any precedent that legitimizes secession carries existential implications. The Somali government responded with diplomatic condemnation, framing the issue as a violation of internationally recognized borders. However, the broader regional response reveals that this was not solely a Somali-Israeli matter. Egypt, for example, viewed developments through a distinct lens. Cairo's economic stability is closely tied to the uninterrupted functioning of the Suez Canal. Revenues from the canal constitute a meaningful share of Egypt's national income and foreign currency reserves. Instability at the southern gateway of the Red Sea introduces economic vulnerability. From Egypt's perspective, the fragmentation of Somalia or the emergence of new external military actors along the Bab el-Mandeb approaches could alter the balance of maritime influence. Consequently, Cairo intensified its military engagement with Somalia, reinforcing cooperation and publicly supporting Somalia's territorial unity. This alignment intersects with Egypt's long-standing tensions with Ethiopia over Nile River water management and the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Ethiopia represents another critical variable. It's a landlocked nation with one of Africa's fastest-growing economies. Ethiopia has sought secure and reliable access to maritime outlets. Its Memorandum of Understanding with Somaliland, granting potential access to the port of Berbera, reflects a long-term strategic objective. Reducing dependence on Djibouti and diversifying maritime corridors. For Addis Ababa, economic growth necessitates logistical depth. Yet Ethiopian access to Somaliland carries political ramifications. It complicates Somalia's sovereignty claims and intersects with Egypt's strategic anxieties. The Nile dispute already positions Cairo and Addis Ababa in structural competition. Maritime access in the Red Sea basin adds another dimension to this rivalry. Thus, Somaliland becomes not only a territorial question, but a node within a broader contest linking the Nile basin to the Red Sea. Simultaneously, Gulf rivalries have layered additional complexity onto the Horn's political landscape. The United Arab Emirates has cultivated relationships across the region, particularly through port development projects. The port of Berbera, with its long runway and dual-use infrastructure potential, has attracted Emirati investment and logistical interest. Infrastructure in such strategic locations often carries both commercial and military significance. Somalia's decision to terminate certain defense arrangements with the UAE marked a pivotal shift. This move created space for alternative Gulf partnerships, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, both seeking to expand their strategic footprint along the Red Sea's western shore, emerged as logical counterparts. The defense agreements signed by Somalia with these states signal a realignment within the Gulf competition spectrum. Israel's recognition of Somaliland therefore acted as a catalyst rather than a solitary cause. It exposed pre-existing fault lines and accelerated the formation of countervailing alignments. Egypt moved to secure its southern maritime flank. Ethiopia pursued logistical leverage. Gulf states recalibrated partnerships. Somalia sought to reinforce sovereignty through external guarantees. What emerges is not a simple binary confrontation, but a layered strategic mosaic. Recognition politics transformed a localized autonomy dispute into a multi-actor geopolitical contest involving Middle Eastern and African powers simultaneously. Maritime security, territorial integrity, energy flows, and infrastructure access are now intertwined. The Horn of Africa, once treated as a peripheral security concern, has become a convergence zone for rival strategic doctrines. Each actor frames its involvement differently: sovereignty, protection, economic necessity, maritime security, or diplomatic recognition. Yet collectively, these moves indicate systemic escalation. Part 2 demonstrates that the Somalia-Saudi defense agreement must be read against this backdrop of cascading strategic responses. The pact is not reactive improvisation. It is part of a structured realignment triggered by shifts in recognition, infrastructure access, and maritime competition. The Horn is no longer defined by internal instability alone. It is now shaped by external positioning, and that positioning is accelerating. What kind of security architecture is now taking shape in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea Basin? The Somalia-Saudi Arabia defense agreement is not merely a bilateral military arrangement, it is a building block in a wider pattern of block formation. Somalia's closer alignment with Saudi Arabia and Qatar suggests the gradual consolidation of a maritime-oriented partnership network. This alignment implicitly balances against competing influence from the United Arab Emirates and Ethiopia and potentially constrains Israeli strategic access. The Red Sea is increasingly functioning as a distinct geopolitical subsystem, no longer just an extension of Middle Eastern politics. It is now emerging as an arena of direct strategic competition in its own right. Coastal states on both the Arabian and African sides are strengthening naval capacities, expanding port infrastructure, and institutionalizing security dialogues. Saudi Arabia's posture is particularly significant. By embedding itself within Somalia's security architecture, Riyadh signals an intention to shape outcomes on the western shore of the Red Sea rather than react to them. This shift aligns with a broader strategic recalibration under which the kingdom seeks to secure trade corridors, diversify economic partnerships, and project stability outward from its own coastline. The concept of security guarantor is evolving. It no longer implies formal alliances alone, but layered cooperation. Over time, such measures create strategic depth. Ports become interoperable nodes, surveillance systems become interconnected, political consultations become institutionalized. Infrastructure lies at the center of this transformation. In contemporary geopolitics, ports, airstrips, and logistics corridors serve dual functions. They are commercial gateways, but also instruments of influence. The port of Berbera, with its long runway and expanding facilities, exemplifies this duality. Similarly, its investments in Somali maritime capacity can gradually reshape the balance of operational control along the Gulf of Aden. This infrastructure-centric competition introduces risk scenarios. One potential pathway involves further militarization of the corridor. If Israel deepens its footprint in Somaliland, rival actors may intensify counterbalancing measures. Gulf competition, particularly between Saudi and the UAE, could spill into more overt strategic rivalry on African soil. Ethiopia's maritime ambitions, if perceived as threatening by Egypt, could escalate Nile Basin tensions into the maritime domain. Another risk lies within Somalia itself. While external partnerships can strengthen state capacity, they also risk entangling domestic politics. If competing powers leverage internal divisions, fragmentation pressures could re-emerge. The durability of Somalia's federal institutions will be a decisive variable. Beyond regional actors, global trade considerations add a further layer of consequence. Approximately 15% of global trade transits the Red Sea corridor. Energy shipments from the Gulf to European markets are particularly exposed. Disruptions have already demonstrated the fragility of global supply chains. Prolonged instability would not remain confined to regional actors. It would reverberate across international markets. Insurance premiums, shipping costs, and route diversification strategies reflect this vulnerability. The rerouting of vessels around the Cape of Good Hope is not sustainable. As a result, external powers, including European states and Asian trading economies, have strong incentives to monitor developments closely. The Horn's security trajectory will increasingly intersect with broader global economic calculations. What is emerging, therefore, is not a singular alliance, but a layered security web centered on the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia's agreement with Somalia represents a proactive insertion into this evolving architecture. It suggests that Gulf states are no longer content to rely solely on external naval coalitions for corridor protection. Instead, they are cultivating bilateral anchors along strategic coastlines. For Somalia, this moment represents both opportunity and responsibility. Strategic relevance enhances bargaining power. However, it also subjects the state to intensified scrutiny and competition. Navigating between sovereignty, preservation, and beneficial external alignment will require calibrated diplomacy. The broader conclusion is structural rather than episodic. The Horn of Africa is undergoing transformation from a peripheral crisis zone into a central geopolitical arena. Maritime corridors, infrastructure assets, and recognition politics have converged to elevate its strategic weight. The Somalia-Saudi Arabia defense agreement should therefore be interpreted not as an isolated diplomatic act, but as an early indicator of a deeper systemic reconfiguration. Geography has reasserted its influence. Maritime security has become inseparable from political alignment. The Red Sea Basin is steadily consolidating into one of the most consequential theaters of 21st century geopolitics. The shift is gradual, but unmistakable. As the Horn of Africa enters a new strategic phase, the implications of this defense deal will continue to unfold. Not only for Somalia and Saudi Arabia, but for the wider Red Sea corridor and the global balance of power. Geopolitics rarely shifts overnight. It evolves through signals, alignments, and calculated agreements such as this one. Thank you for taking the time to engage with this analysis. If you found this briefing valuable, consider subscribing to the channel for structured, in-depth geopolitical insights delivered with clarity and precision. Your support enables the continuation of serious strategic discussions. And as always, share your perspective in the comments. Informed dialogue strengthens understanding. Till the next analysis.